This drip all on my body, soaking wet the Sani. Looking like a walking liquor, you can tell I'm grinding. Rolling back was full of loud, I can't hear nobody.
What's up, fuckers? Episode 8, The Beer Latte Show. I'm Steve.
Danny.
Danielle.
And today's episode is brought to you by Lower Forge Brewery in Medford, New Jersey. We have 2 beers from them. The first one, Anacrusis, which is a Belgian triple ale. And actually, taking a quick look, this was aged for 6 months in tequila barrels that was originally aged from bourbon barrels. So I guess a bourbon barrel that someone did tequila in. They acquired these barrels, and now they did beer in them.
I like this.
What's it smell like?
This doesn't really smell.
To me, it smells like a very light.
Yeah, like a light beer.
I love the taste, actually. This is probably one of my favorites, to be honest with you.
Yeah. This is really
That's actually really smooth.
Yeah.
And what I didn't see here is it says that the barrel also gets blueberries.
Yeah, I like it.
They're actually saying this is a 9.3%.
Ooh, even better yet.
So this can get you twisted fast.
Yeah.
According to them, their style, they're calling it a barrel-aged fruited Belgian triple. I guess because of the blueberries.
I could taste blueberries.
Can you a little bit, right?
Yeah, I really can.
Like a slight hint of them.
Yeah.
This would be my ultimate summer beer.
You know what?
Seriously.
We have to go back.
Now they're saying, it's funny you said summer beer, that they're claiming it pairs well with like a barbecue. Do you agree, Danny?
Oh, absolutely.
Also meat stews or a nice thick steak.
I would not.
Not a skinny steak. It has to be thick. So I am not one to pair with fucking dessert, but they're saying like milk chocolate or chocolate bread pudding, which I've never heard of, but now I want it.
Yeah, I would like to try chocolate bread pudding.
I like bread pudding.
Right now.
Just, I guess, just chocolate bread instead. That sounds, why didn't I ever think of that?
Chocolate bread. What? How do you have chocolate bread? It's chocolate bread pudding. There's probably just chocolate in the bread pudding.
I guess, but you can make chocolate bread.
How?
I don't know. You make like banana chocolate chip bread.
True.
Or the custard. They probably just put cocoa in the custard before they make
cocoa
it.
powder. So
now
any
it's
bakers
sounding
out
worse.
there, please reach out to me with your chocolate bread pudding recipes.
And he will never make it.
No,
But
my wife will. That's what she's there for.
This is what?
To bake. You're there to bake, clean, like I told you in the past. Take care of the children. All the normal things.
Meanwhile, I can't cook to save my life. We all know that. We order out most days.
I gotta take another. That's good.
It's so good.
I could so drink this with like a steamer pot
I
of
could
seafood.
so drink the rest of this crowler.
Yeah.
It's fruity. I get at that point, but it's
I'm totally
super
tasting
high in alcohol content for how smooth it is.
the blueberries. Do you taste the blueberries?
Honestly, it reminds me like kind of, it's weird, like a fruit salad.
Oh my God, I was going to say fruit
Yes.
salad. Fuck.
Yeah.
I was like ready to say it. I was like, she going to say that?
Uh-huh. One of those ones that you get out of a little cup.
Yes.
Yes. Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. Now that's why I like it. With that syrup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's,
Yeah, it's basically
wow.
like they took that syrup, poured it in here.
Uh-huh.
But not as heavy. It's very light and
It's
crisp.
super light.
Yeah. Let's just stay on this beer for a while. Wait, what do they pair it with? I'll go get some food out of the fridge.
Yeah. So this one really was bought because of Nick, even though I don't think it's going to be all that sour,
Oh, the next one.
is a cranberry rake, they're calling it. It's a sour ale.
Cranberry rake. It's
Even though-
pretty.
even though
It's like
Nick's not here.
pink almost.
So it's like a pink, almost like Moscato looking.
Yeah, like a rosé.
I'm going to start off with, it's okay, but I'm going back to the other one. I'm not a sour ale type of person.
It's
I didn't
not-
think I would be.
It's not that sour.
Oh, okay.
Compared to other sours I've had, that's not like, it's like hit me in the lower jaw where I'm like, puckering. It's got a nice strong cranberry flavor. It's super light.
It's supposed to be tart. It says,
Yeah, sour is supposed to be sour. It's supposed to be tart. And this one's like not as sour as I was expecting because I had other sours that were like ridiculously tart.
like Sour Patch Kids?
Yeah,
Really?
like crazy tart. But this is actually more refreshing with a little tartness.
The smell doesn't really do it for me because it's kind of smelled yeasty to me. But the taste is really not that bad. Like, yeah,
I think
it's
you'd
a little
have to
tart.
be into sours.
Yes.
Is that how you say it? Sours?
I mean, this could start you into it because, like I said, it's not that sour.
Right. It isn't. It really isn't. It's very mild. What does it pair with?
Somehow, carrot cake,
Oh, I think everything pairs with carrot cake.
caramel cheesecake, creme brulee, if you're going
Ooh,
desserts.
yes.
I don't eat lamb, but apparently you can have it with some lamb or some southern fried chicken steak.
Creme brulee.
Chicken fried steak's delicious. I would
She's
not
still
drink this.
stuck on the creme brulee.
Yeah, she said-
How about, does it go with Cheez-Its? Because we have those.
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily disappointed in how sour it is. I guess I was waiting to get that tartness from a super strong
I
sour.
was expecting you to go like that thing where you get where the back of your tongue.
But it's a good one to start both of you on since you've never had sours before.
Yeah.
And I will get something way more sour on the show eventually.
I'm not into sour things. I'm going back to this fruit salad one that I really enjoy.
Yeah, the cranberry rake, it's still good. I will still enjoy it on some summer days. But that first one's a clear. If not that we're choosing winners between the two, but that would be a clear winner. Honestly, in the last few beers I've had recently, it's like topping out right now. That beer,
Yeah.
the Anacrusis, is fucking really good.
Yeah. Me too.
It's definitely my favorite
Yeah.
out of all the things we drank.
Ever?
But yeah, no, I definitely love that Anacrusis one. I could probably drink the growler in one night.
Yeah. I agree.
I'm serious.
But in a cup. Like, got to be classy.
So today we have a special guest, Terri Reid. She is an author, and she is on the line with us. Terri, how are you?
Good. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great.
Great.
So you said through Messenger, you've written a few books.
I've written about 30 novels.
Okay, so I'm way off, but I'm,
That's okay.
I got the 3 part right, forgot the 0.
No, I've written, I mostly write paranormal mysteries, and my main protagonist in my main series is a former Chicago cop who is shot in the line of duty. She has an out-of-body experience, and she basically has a choice of, to continue to the light or come back. And she chooses to come back. When she wakes up, she can now see and communicate with ghosts. And so she opens a private investigation agency where she basically has ghosts for clients, and she solves all their mysteries. That's been fun. But I've also done some fantasy, some urban fantasy, and another paranormal mystery series.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thanks.
I was looking at your books, and I have to say that, are they all trees?
The Mary O'Reilly series is all trees. Yeah.
I love that. I love how you did
Thank
that.
you. I just think trees have such, an interesting character. And there's so many folk legends about trees, and the facts that, there's an old folk legend that if you cut down an oak tree, you release spirits into the air.
Really?
Yeah. So I've always loved trees. I just think like the Ents from Lord of the Rings, I just think that they've got like this magical power. I've really enjoyed using them for my covers.
I love trees, as you can see. Oh, well.
She can't see.
Yeah. I mean, I have a tree on my back.
Oh,
It's a tattoo, but no, but my love for trees is extensive, and your books caught my eye, so I just thought I'd give you that.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
So you said you had some paranormal stories yourself, like actual activity with yourself.
Yes, it's like a 130 to 150-year-old house. And we're out in the country. We're in far northwest Illinois. So we're about 2 hours northwest of Chicago. And we're almost to the Wisconsin border and almost to the Iowa border. We have 5 acres of land and this 3-story farmhouse. And when we first moved here from Chicago, I felt like there was the house has 2 staircases. There's a front staircase that leads to the front door, but then there's a back staircase that leads to the kitchen. And the middle bedroom, there's 5 bedrooms on the second floor, and the middle bedroom has 2 doors. And so you can't get from the front of the second floor to the back of the second floor without walking through that middle bedroom.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think the back part of the house maybe was an addition, because that's where all the plumbing is. That's where
maybe that was
the
the access point through the bedroom.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's 2 more bedrooms back behind that middle bedroom. Out in the country at night, when it gets dark, it gets pitch dark, which is something I grew up in Chicago. So that's very unusual for me to have, you can't see your hand in front of your face dark.
Oh, that's dark.
It is, but it's kind of cool because there's no one around. And so my toddler girls, who are about 18 months apart, they're all grown up and married now, but when they were home, they shared that middle bedroom. And at night, when I tucked them in, I'd feel like somebody was in the back hallway. It was creepy just because there was somebody out there, but it wasn't frightening. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I could close my eyes and I could picture her, but I never saw her. And my son, who was about 6 years old at the time, would come down in the morning and he'd say, "Mom, the lady in the long black dress came into my bedroom last night." And I'd say, okay, well, you have to understand, I grew up with ghost stories and those kinds of things. So when somebody says something, I don't immediately say anything like, oh, you're just imagining. To me, it's a perfectly viable thing to happen. So I'd say, so what did she do? And he'd say, well, she checked on me and she checked on Nathan because they were sharing bunk beds. And then she looked out the window and then she left. And I said, "Well, she was just, she's just checking on you guys. So that's kind of nice." And that was kind of what I felt like there was just another mom in the house. And so we actually met the people whose grandparents built this house. And they were in like their 60s when we met them. And so they asked us about the house and how we liked it. And we had a house fire. And so after we came back into the house and did some remodeling, he asked if he could, see what we had done because, the fire took out a wall and I thought, oh, that looks good, so I kept it out as those kind of things.
Nicely remodeled.
Yeah, exactly. And so gave him the tour. And then I said, strangest thing, said, ever since we've moved in here, I've just felt like there's another person here. And so then I described who I could see when my eyes were closed, in my mind's eye. And I finished and he looked at me and he said, Terri, you have just described my grandmother perfectly.
Aw.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so it had been, another mom. And then years later, the son who had been 6 was now in high school and he was in like the varsity choir. The girls from the varsity choir decided to drive all the way out to our place and TP our oak trees, which, today would be worth thousands of dollars.
Yeah. It's an expensive job.
I know, right? So they were out there. And so we woke up. It was a Saturday night that they came out. So we woke up Sunday morning and looked out the window and there's TP wafting, in the air. And I kind of thought it was cool. My son was very embarrassed that his mom thought that was cool. But I thought, well, this is, we've never had this. And so when he got to school on Monday, they came up and said, what'd you think about what we did? And he said, yeah, my mom actually liked it. And then they said, well, why didn't your mom come out and talk to us? And he said, my mom was in bed. And they said, no, we saw her. And he said, no, really, my mom was in bed. And they said, no, she was right by the kitchen window. She watched us the entire time we put the TP on the trees. We all saw her.
Oh, man. She didn't like that.
Yeah. David said, oh, that wasn't my mom. That was our ghost. So we've never been TP'd since, which is a shame actually now. But
Did you ever take pictures of the house or did you have any anomalies like that? Or did you?
it's interesting. On my podcast, it's called Terri Reid's Attic. That's actually a picture of our house. And so have you guys heard of Dale Kaczmarek?
No.
Okay, Dale is, and I always get the name of it. He's from Chicago, and he is like one of the original paranormal investigators. I forget the name of his group, but he's been doing paranormal investigation for like 45 years. He is like the original Ghostbuster. And he and I were both speaking at a conference in Chicago. It was called Love is Murder, and it was for mystery writers. And I was asked to speak and he was asked to speak. So we both listened to each other's presentations and then he and I got to chat afterwards. And I was telling him about my house and the things that had happened. And he said, do you want me to bring a group in? And I said, yeah, no, because, we hear footsteps. We can smell perfume. And there's some other things that have happened to me that I'll share. But my feeling is these are not hostile entities. These are people who built this house, who love this house, who raised their family here. And I'm okay with sharing it because we actually think, so maybe I'll back up. When we had the house fire, it was first weekend of November. And my husband and I we had a meeting in the biggest town. We're not too far. We're about 45 minutes away from Rockford, Illinois. And we had to go to Rockford for a meeting on a Saturday night. And my oldest daughter was babysitting. And we were supposed to we had a wood burning stove and we were supposed to get some wood during the day, but the person didn't show up. Well, after we left, the person showed up and we had a wood burning furnace in our basement and we had an old coal chute that the wood went down, but we had a room that was separate that you'd put the wood in. Well, this guy got there, it was after dark and he just threw the wood in And so some of the wood kind of rolled up underneath the wood burning stove and eventually caught fire in the middle of the night. And so we were all asleep. And it was very interesting because that week we'd adopted a kitten, and the kitten was downstairs in the kitchen in a box. And somehow that kitten got out of the box, up the back staircase, and into David, the son that had seen the lady and everything, into his bed and woke him up. And he woke up and sat up, and there was smoke in his room. And so he woke all of us up. I think David was in 3rd grade. He woke the rest of us up, and we all got out of the house safely. And I thought about that afterwards, when I could finally think clearly. And I thought, animals don't walk up the stairs, or animals hide when there's fire. That's why, they have to put like covering over horses when they take them out of a barn fire, because the animals don't want to go through the fire. They want to hide under something. And so for a little kitten to get up there was kind of almost impossible. And I wonder if, this ghost didn't have something to do with saving our family, that little bit of protection. And so I kind of love having her here. The other thing that happened to me that I saw, I had my office in the attic, and it was we finished the attic, and I'd often get up like at midnight because I had a story idea, and I'd just type all night long. I had a big Bernese mountain dog, and his name was Riley, and Riley followed me wherever I went. So Riley and I came up to the attic late one night, and Riley climbed onto the couch and proceeded to fall asleep, and I started writing. At about 4:30 in the morning, I saw that Riley lifted his head up, and he looked towards the attic stairs. And, attic stairs for us, there's no banister. And it's kind of as somebody is walking up the stairs, you first see their head, then you see their shoulders. And does that make sense? You kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can picture it.
Yep.
Okay, great. And it was about, the stairs were maybe 10 feet from my desk, and it was directly to my right. And so I'm typing, and Riley's couch is right in front of me. So I could see that he's looking at the staircase and wagging his tail. And I assumed it was my husband who had woken up and felt that I was not in bed next to him and was just coming up to check on me.
That's very nice of him.
I know, every Sunday it
When I
wasn't
wake up,
him,
my
though.
wife's not there. I'm
Yeah,
just
no.
like, I got more room.
No, Terry's saying she thought it was her husband, but wasn't. So not nice of him.
Right? Yeah. No. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm finishing this thought. I'm not gonna look over there. And so I continue writing, and out of the corner of my eye, I can see this man on the staircase. And he is, and I don't know how old you guys are, but do you guys even remember the old Bonanza show?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This guy was Haas Cartwright. This guy was huge. Dan Blocker was his real name, but Haas Cartwright. He was a former football player. He was this ginormous man. And this guy was dressed in old-fashioned overalls, black and red buffalo plaid shirt, and he was huge. His muscles were huge. And I turned to look, and he was no longer there.
Oh.
And then I thought, well, I've been up all night writing ghost stories, duh. But then I remembered that Riley had seen him first. So that experience had happened just about 2 months before I spoke at the Love is Murder conference. And so I was telling Dale Kazmarek about this. And he told me the way our eyes are created is that they're made of all these little rods. And at the corner of our eyes, the rods are elongated, because they have a further way to go. I'm making all these hand motions that you guys can't see right now.
Rods and cones.
I can feel them.
We know what you're saying.
Okay, good. So the rods are long on the corner of our eyes. And he said the length of those rods help them pick up different light spectrums, and they pick up the paranormal light spectrum. And so he said that's why we always see things out of the corner of our eyes, because that's the part of our eyes that has the correct lens. And then he told me, so when you turned, he could have still been there, but you were using the wrong lens. And I said to him, I didn't want to hear that.
Yes, that's frightening now.
That totally
That's
makes
right.
sense. I mean, there's times that I've seen things and I look and I'm like, I'm sure we all have. And now that totally makes sense.
I know, and now you have to just wave at them, or you have to try to train yourself to look out of the corner of your eye, which I've tried. It's impossible. So,
Yeah, I mean,
anyway,
you can catch it once, but how are you going to stay
right.
there?
So how many spirits do you have in your house, do you think? Just the family?
So I described this person. I started describing this person to the grandson, who at that time was like 70 now. And just said, I just see this other person. And I started, and he stopped me. And then he finished the description, which totally creeped me out because it's like, oh, that's real. And then he said, was he missing his right arm? And I said, I have no idea because I only saw his left side. And I said, but his left side, his arm was huge. And he said he had lost his right arm in a farming accident. And so he had to do everything with his left arm. So it was this big, muscular arm. So it again kind of freaked me out because it kind of verified who I had seen. As my daughter, the one from the very beginning, as she got older and came home for college, occasionally she would hear a man's voice when she was home alone, and she'd like answer the door. And before she could answer the door, she'd hear a man's voice say, "Who is it?" Like he was protecting her. We call them Grandma and Grandpa Molniks because that's the family that built this house. So we have Grandma and Grandpa Molniks. We've also occasionally seen a little boy and heard humming. That's actually poor David. David was home from college, and all of us were gone. And he got up late and went to the bathroom and heard somebody humming outside the bathroom door. And he figured it was one of his siblings and said, I'm in here. I'll be out soon. And whoever it was kept humming. And, being a polite older brother, he said, "Stop it." and brother, brotherly, lovely noise. And he said, and it kept humming. And he yelled, "If you don't stop it, I'm going to come out of here and punch you." And it kept humming. And so he hurried up and was very angry and rushed out of the bathroom, and there was nobody there. And so he called me at work and he said, "Mom, who's home?" And I said, "You." And he said, No, who else is home with me?" And I said, "Nobody. I drove everyone to school." And he said, "No, somebody's home with me." And I said, "Yeah, no, Dave, you're by yourself." And there was a long pause. And he said, "So I'm going to go to school now."
Oh my God.
I said, "Well, I thought you were going to hang for a while." He said, "Yeah, no, I'm going to go." So I'm assuming he got dressed. I don't know, but he
One
was
would only
gone.
hope.
Yeah. So for sure the three, and occasionally I personally think that depending on the season, because where we are, there were Native American tribes that came through here. And like in the fall and the spring, it's a lot more active. And I think because they probably traveled through. So I think we get residual stuff, not the intelligence, but, if a group has traveled and your house wasn't there before, if they've used this path for 100 years or 200 years, and suddenly there's a house there, they're still going to walk right through it. So we get that kind of stuff occasionally. But that's pretty much it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay, so I know, so for sure you, your son, and your daughter have witnessed and or heard things, but how about your husband and anybody else?
Okay, so I should have said, so I have 7 children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's a lot of us. There's often been times where we have all been downstairs and we have heard loud footsteps on the second floor, and we know nobody else is there. And I'll take the front staircase, my husband will take the back staircase, and we'll meet in the center and have met nobody. And so we've all heard that. We've also all been in the living room, and we could smell, almost taste perfume, like really bad floral perfume. And it's like, oh, somebody's in the room with us. And it's kind of a weird sensation, but you can smell it, but you can just taste a little bit, like that.
Mhm.
Like overpowering smell.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And it smells like the old fashioned type of perfume where it wasn't
Right.
really, yeah,
Like,
not
yes.
refined.
Right, exactly. Yes, very heavy. I think in one way or another, all of my children have had experiences, but I feel it's because they're open to it. I think when people say, "Well, I don't believe," they're not going to have it because they've closed that part of themselves off. But if you open yourself up to the possibilities, then I think your mind is open to hear or see or feel something.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
So you think there's absolutely no chance that it's no such thing as ghost?
So for me, because of the experiences I've had, and then when I start, when you start writing ghost stories, and it's really interesting because I'm an independent author. And so I have to have an intimate relationship with my readers. I have a Facebook page, actually 2 Facebook pages, and go to book signings. And every time there's somebody telling me a story about their ghosts. And I get emails about people's ghosts. And the podcast I do, people are sending me stories about their personal experiences with ghosts. And I guess to me, if I was going to look at it scientifically, I would say there's too much evidence. I have seen too much evidence to deny, that there can't be ghosts. I don't know if I did a double negative. So, I
No, I,
believe in
I
ghosts.
totally agree
Okay.
with you. I
Okay,
agree
good.
Whatever it
with
was,
you.
it sounded good.
Okay.
Very ignorant to that. Don't worry about it.
Okay, good.
Have you ever used anybody's stories for like an inspiration for a book?
The first book in the Mary O'Reilly series is actually something that happened to my sister.
That's the one called Loose Ends, I think I saw.
Yes, yeah, yes. And at the very beginning, a ghost comes into her house and walks up the staircase. And the wind's blowing and it carries this sickly sweet smell of death along with it. I mean, really good imagery. But my sister she lived in Dublin, Ohio, and she and her husband, now her ex-husband, but they would buy houses and flip them. They go in and remodel and flip them. And so she was home, her kids were asleep, her husband was on a business trip, and she had just spent the night stripping a parquet floor off of a main entranceway. And she'd worked till like 2:30 in the morning. So she was exhausted. So she went to bed, and she said that she was sleeping when she felt like somebody else was in the room. And she turned over in her bed, and there, standing next to her, was this Union soldier. And his body was riddled with bullet holes. And he was carrying his head in his hands.
Oh,
And he was just standing there. And my sister, you'd have to know my sister looked at him and said, "No, I am too tired for this. This is not going to happen tonight." And she said that the ghost kind of was startled. And it
Role
kind of
reversal.
shrugged. I know, right? Like, wait, you're not supposed to say that. And it kind of shrugged, and it turned around and it left, And so that's kind of my first scene in the Mary O'Reilly story, to explain her relationship with ghosts. They're just people too. They just happen to be dead. And so that was the inspiration for the very beginning of the Mary O'Reilly stories.
And so what is your take? Because I know there's a few different types of takes on ghosts. Is it just like a residual energy? Because we did a whole podcast on, our beliefs on ghosts and everything. Do you think it's just a residual energy? Do you think they go on from this lifetime? I mean, they're not stuck here.
I think that we're dealing with a lot of stuff. I think that, first of all, I have felt protected, and I think when Grandma Molnix was looking out the window at those girls TPing our house, I think she was looking at them to make sure that we were safe, because we were all sleeping. And so there's got to be, for her case and maybe Grandpa Molnick's case, there's some intelligence there. And I don't think that they're bound to our house. I think that this was a place that they loved and they raised their family. And so they check on us. And actually, now that the kids are mostly grown and gone out of the house, we don't hear her, very often. And so when my daughter visited with her 2-year-old, we were actually, my husband and I, with 2 of our sons, were driving out to Devil's Tower. We were actually in, I think it's Moorhead, Wyoming. Anyway, we were really close to Devil's Tower, and I get a phone call from my daughter, and she said, "Mom, I'm downstairs in the front room." And she said her baby was upstairs. He was like 2, and I heard footsteps. I said, "Sarah, I'm in Wyoming. There's not a lot I can do about it." And her husband had been out with Boy Scouts, and he was going to come home that night, but he had been out at a local state park with the Boy Scouts. And I said, "It's just Grandma Molnix. There's a baby in the house. She's just checking on the baby." And that calmed her down. And as I said, we have 5 acres. We at that time had 2 big dogs, both Bernese Mountain Dogs, and she had a chocolate lab. Nobody was gonna break into the house, and she knew it wasn't a person, but she heard the footsteps. And so I think that that's intelligence. But I do think that there's patterns. Some of the ghost stories that I've collected, the person had always done this. They had always walked, that way. They had always taken. And so I think those are residual. But I also truly believe that there's some things out there that have never been human that we shouldn't be messing with because I don't think they have good intentions towards us. And I'm very uncomfortable with those kinds of entities. And I've only encountered those once or
Meaning
twice.
like a demon type
Yeah,
of deal?
if that's what it is, demon, shadow person, whatever you want to call them.
What about elementals?
And my husband and I've had 2 experiences on our land. We have 5 acres, and part of it is woods. And years ago, when the kids were all home, it was summertime and it was dusk. And I had called everybody in. It's time to come in, get washed up. And he was at the far end of one of the pastures, and he looked, and there was a light kind of moving around in the forest, in the woods. And it almost looked as if somebody, if they were wearing like a flashlight on their head, like on a cap or something. And that was the way it was kind of bobbing around. And so he sent the kids in and he started following it. He said as he got closer to it, it would just go a little bit further away. And he would follow a little bit more and would go a little bit further away. And then he realized that there was no noise, that, there was no crunching of leaves or breaking of twigs. It was totally silent. And then he got a really bad feeling. And so he turned around and came in. And, we talked about will-o'-the-wisp, the kind of the old fairy, tradition of a light that would lead people away from safety into fairy. Now, I don't know if that was it. It's not a swampy area. We live on a hill. And so it's really hard to figure out what that light could be. And then about 2 years later, I was out on our back deck, and it was about 3:00 in the morning. The dog had to go out. So I was on the back deck and I saw a similar light. And I stayed on the deck because I'm not going to go there. And I saw it bopping around in that corner of the woods. And I thought it was a person with a flashlight. But then I could hear barn owls out in that corner, and they were talking to each other. And so if a person had been there, they wouldn't have been doing that.
Right.
What is that? I don't have a good answer for that, but I do believe that there's elementals. I think there's things that we don't know about.
Now, you said you had 2 experiences with a shadow figure?
So I was doing a book signing in Salt Lake City, and it was at a Barnes and Noble, and it was a shopping mall that was attached to an old railroad depot. And they had clear.
Well, that's interesting.
It's really a cool thing, and you walk through the depot to get to, and it's kind of an outdoor mall, so you walk through the depot and then there's concrete steps and there are different levels, and the stores are then all spread out beyond that. And the depot itself has that old, the black and white checkered floor, and it's really kind of cool looking. So on the way in, we just walked through there, didn't think anything of it. And then I did my book signing. And then afterwards, I said to the clerk, so where's the closest ladies' room? Because I had just sat for like 2 hours and, it's kind of, yeah, it's time. So she said the closest bathroom was in the depot. I had my daughter with me. She was married at the time, my husband and son-in-law. So we all walked back, outside, and it was summertime. So it was still light. My daughter and I stepped into the women's bathroom, and immediately that fight or flight feeling came over us. And she looked at me and her eyes were as wide as saucers, and mine were probably the same. And she said, "Mom, do you?" And I said, "Don't talk about it. Don't say anything." And so we both went to the bathroom and we didn't say a word and walked out of there. But it was the most evil feeling I've ever felt. I mean, the most threatening, that's probably a better word, threatening feeling I had ever felt. So when we got back to our hotel, I Googled it, and it turned out that a paranormal group had investigated that area, and there had been lots of sightings, and they had actually, somebody had taken a picture, and it was of a shadow figure sticking its head out of one of the booths in the bathroom, and they had caught this shadow figure. So yeah, I'm not going to use that bathroom again.
Yeah.
What was the feeling? You said threatening. Did you feel depressed, like a depressing feeling, or was it like more like the hairs were standing up on the back of your head? Neck,
Yeah.
or-
The hairs were standing up, but it was like I was being threatened, like I was going to have to fight. I mean, it was that kind of like my safety. I wasn't safe.
Oh.
It was very, and I remember walking out of that bathroom, and then once I closed the bathroom door, it's gone. And I said, my first words were, somebody died in there. I mean, it was violent and it was heavy. And so I don't know what happened in there. And I don't know. I mean, it's an old station. So who knows? But it was a viable presence. And yeah, it's not something, if somebody said, oh, would you like to do a paranormal? No, not there. Yeah, not in that place.
Wow. But not when you were doing the signing, nothing, nobody said anything to you.
No, and it was funny because one of the paranormal groups from Salt Lake City came to meet me, and they had EVPs, and we had a great time. But there was absolutely no threatening feeling. And then walking out of there, it was a beautiful summer day, or evening, and we were chatting about how cool it was. So yeah, there wasn't any, sometimes you think, oh, well, you were spooked already, or it wasn't anything like that. It just slapped me on the side of my face. I mean, it was just so boof right there. Very interesting.
That's crazy. It is that even both of you experienced it.
Right. And that maybe makes it even more real that we both felt that feeling as soon as we stepped inside.
I mean, if I was a ghost and I was stuck in a bathroom, it's like, that's my spot, I'd be upset to start with.
Yeah, that's probably where the
It's a little shitty in there.
Well, at least it was a woman's bathroom. I think a men's bathroom would have been even more gross, but
Did anybody do any research to back up these claims? Like, there's times that I've walked into places and I feel like a lot of people have the inner compass or whatever you would call it. And they say, well, something doesn't feel right in this place, or you hear stories about it. And I always like to try to research it as much as possible.
I just did the basic Google. I kind of looked and it just verified. I didn't. And we were leaving, I was just in Salt Lake for one day. So we were leaving the next day. And so I didn't I mean, I know I love Dead Files, and I love what Steve does, when he goes in and he checks all the records and things like that. I didn't do anything like that. I just verified that somebody else had experienced something similar. And once I saw that photo, yeah, it freaked me out. It's interesting because you have a certain level of fear. And then when something else validates what you saw, the fear increases. It's like, oh,
I was going to say, yeah, definitely. If someone said, oh, I have evidence, at least you're like, oh, you know what? At least I'm not going crazy,
Yes. Yep. Well, and maybe that's it. I've had so many experiences in my life that I trust those feelings. I trust that if I feel threatened, it's probably not a good situation. And so I trust that. And the fact that Sarah, had also immediately felt it kind of validated it too. But no, we didn't do any further research. So if anybody's from Salt Lake City is listening, go right ahead and research that for us.
Yeah, and
Yes.
definitely
Definitely
let us
Let
know.
us know. Yeah.
And you said there was a second time? Not to dig into the horrible
I know,
parts
right?
of your ghost stories, but I'm curious.
You know what? I'm doing an old person thing and I can't think of it at this point, but I know I've had, I can't.
It's probably for the
Oh,
best.
He gets scared
Oh,
very
Gracie,
easily.
there
We're
you
not
go.
allowed to watch stuff. It's sad for us. For me,
It's already dark here, so
Well, and I'm up in my attic doing this. We put a sound booth up in the attic now. And so, yeah, so hopefully nobody's going to peek in the sound booth and say, hey, huh?
yeah, let us know if you see
I'll
some
do
ghosts in
that,
your attic
yeah.
as we're doing
Yeah,
this.
really.
Let me ask you this. What is your favorite thing that you did in the past?
If you don't mind, though, let me tell you my very favorite ghost story.
Absolutely.
yes.
Okay, that was told to me by somebody else. So every year I would be asked by the Stevenson County Historical Society to come in and tell ghost stories during their Halloween event. And so the Historical Society is this beautiful mansion, and they would dress it up in old-fashioned mourning where they would like cover the mirrors, and they actually had a funeral director bring in old mortuary equipment, and he had a horse-drawn hearse, and he would give people rides on the hearse around the area. And so I got to stay in the one-room schoolhouse that they had moved to the property, and I told ghost stories all night. And I knew that talking all night long would kill me, so I insisted that people share stories too. So I would tell stories for about 10 minutes and then give people an opportunity. So this woman stood up, and she was kind of a grandma, and she said that she had just gotten back from visiting her daughter, her son-in-law, and her grandkids, and they lived in Pennsylvania. And they lived in a really old house. And she said we had finished dinner, and we moved from the dining room into the living room. And her chair was situated in the living room such that she could still see out of the corner of her eye into the dining room. And she said she was just kind of having a conversation, and there's movement. And so she turned, and she saw a little boy dressed in period clothing float across the room and disappear into the wall. And then she said the look on her face must have been one of shock, because her 4-year-old grandson came over and took her hand in his little hands and patted it gently and said, "Don't worry, Grandma, that's just the attic people."
Oh, okay. Oh, man.
Isn't that a great story?
And you're actually in
I
an
know I
attic,
am,
so
yeah.
I mean,
It's like, oh.
Yeah, you're currently attic people.
I'm sure I am attic people right now. Yes, yes.
Like, what is it about attics that are so creepy?
that and
Yes.
basements.
Oh, I hate basements. I prefer attics to basements, but I think it's because we don't go up here. In our other space, we make those spaces our own. We walk through them every day. We decorate them. We do stuff. Usually our attics and our basements are forgotten. And so things from the past can take them back over because we're not there to claim them ourselves. So I think if it's been used a lot, that space, like if somebody refinishes a basement, it's not as bad. But when they don't, when it's just a place where you put the camping gear and stuff, those are the creepy ones. So that's my inexpert feeling.
Makes a lot of sense.
So the Beast of Bray Road.
Yeah, I actually want to get into this because this is like what I've read. Some of the coolest things. There's even 2 movies on
Yes.
it that are out.
Yes.
And I actually want to go home tonight and at least watch one of them. One of them is only an hour long.
Okay. The Small Town Monsters one.
Maybe. There's one called The Beast of Bray Road that came out in 2005. And then there's one that came out in 2018 called The Bray Road Beast.
Okay, I think there's and it's through Amazon, Small Town Monsters. It's called The Bray Road Beast. Yeah, those guys,
Yes.
guys are great. I've heard them being interviewed, and they're awesome. They've gone to all these small towns, like they've done the Mothman, and they basically do these documentaries on all of these things. So I would highly recommend. I've seen that one, so I would highly recommend that one. There's a journalist
Who documented the first time?
Linda Godfrey is this journalist from the Whitewater area, and she's looking, and I've done freelance journalism, so I totally get this. You're thinking, I've got to come up with a story. So a couple people had said, hey, there's a werewolf on Bray Road. So she decides she's going to do this just fun feature story. So she goes and talks to animal control in that county where near Whitewater. Beast of Bray Road. I'm looking for information on the Beast of Bray Road. And he says, oh, you mean the werewolf? And he goes to his file cabinet and he opens it and he pulls out a file that's like 4 inches thick with sightings of this beast. And the sightings go back to the 1940s. And Bray Road, I've driven Bray Road. It's maybe 4 miles long. It's not big, but it's got farms on either side. There's sightings of people who have scratches on their cars, from it following them. There's been police officers who have seen this thing hunched over roadkill and eating it. There has just been, and it's a bipedal dog-like creature that stands about 6 feet tall. And people have seen it stand and run. They've also seen it run on all 4s. And it's really interesting because now there seems to be, as she's done more and more research, almost an alien, almost an interdimensional kind of aspect to it, where it just kind of leaves an area. She's kind of done research on the beast, and it took her to a farm in Wisconsin that has a lot of the same characteristics as Skinwalker Ranch in Utah.
I was going to say, let me ask you this question. I go in all different aspects of paranormal. My question to you is, do you think is it a spirit or do you think it may be Native American?
First of all, I don't think it's spirit because people have had physical, it's bumped their car, it's scratched their. So I think it's tangible. It could be Native American, but it's one of those chicken and the eggs. Who came first? I mean, was it the beast that came first? Then the Native Americans told a legend about it. So that's a really interesting. Just like skinwalkers. Are skinwalkers actually aliens that are shapeshifters that have come through, like, again, Skinwalker Ranch? They talk about seeing alien things and seeing things kind of disappear and come back and seeing ships and things like that. So are these interdimensional creatures that come in and out? I could believe that. Do I think it's a werewolf? See, in that, I don't. I think if it was just a beast with the ability that we have with drones and I think we would have caught it. And since it's been seen since the 1940s, I think there has to be, it's like the Bigfoot thing. So how do they do it?
Yeah.
And are there there has to be lots of them, but how does that happen?
So is there like an opening somewhere? Is that what you're saying? Like there's some kind of.
Yeah. Like a portal. I think that's the.
Yeah. Like that would be a great spot for a portal.
Imagine that insurance claim. I swear, dude, I was scratched by a beast.
I know,
My
right?
car was scratched. Is it covered?
You know what? It's Wisconsin. They would totally believe that.
Yeah. They're like, we got you.
Is that Jake from State
Yeah,
Farm?
that's right. And what is he wearing, right?
Yeah. What the heck is he wearing?
So you said you live close to that road?
I live about an hour's drive, so I've driven up there.
Oh, okay. Well, it's closer than me.
Yeah, so yeah, relatively close to that road. Yeah, not close enough that I've seen a beast like on my back porch or anything. And I think as I've written ghost stories, I've opened up my mind to things happening.
I was going to ask that. So you think you're more like susceptible being that you're so open-minded to it?
I think so. I think once you do that and then you're involved in it, and maybe that's everything. Did you ever notice when you're shopping for a car and you're looking for a certain kind of car?
Yeah.
Don't you always see that car?
You see them
Same
everywhere.
car.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that before you
Okay.
even brought it up. Same thing. Yeah.
So I think it's
Yeah.
that same thing as you immerse yourself in something, either you're more aware of it or you're more susceptible to it. And so as I've done more and more research for things, the world is an amazing place. And I don't think that we should close our minds off to any possibilities because we just don't know. For example, and I know you guys did UFOs. Was it last week you did one on UFOs?
Well, just on aliens, like the
Okay.
concept of, I guess, where we kind of stood but yes.
So years ago, when my kids were really little, my husband was a scoutmaster. And so up in Wisconsin in the North Woods, there's a Boy Scouts of America camp called Makajawan. And so I took the kids to the family camp, and my husband took the scouts and the troops to the Boy Scout part of it. And so all of my kids at that time, just 4, and they were little. And so we're in this family camp in our cabin, and it's not, it's not luxurious at all. I think it's one room with everything's in it, and it's got beds. And so 3 of the kids were sharing one bed, and David was a baby. And so he and I were sharing in another. And I remember and our cabin was kind of far away from everybody else's, and there were like trees that blocked it from anybody else's view, and we were right by the lake. And in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep, and I noticed all of my kids were tossing and turning, and like pillows were off the beds. I mean, they were sleeping, but it was a very restless sleep, and I just kept feeling like something was out there. I just felt like something was wrong, but I've seen the movies. I'm not going outside, so I stay.
So you got the worst cabin.
Well, they actually do go outside. That's where they get.
I know. It's like, don't go outside.
Duh.
So
Silly.
yeah. So I stayed in the cabin and I waited, and finally at about 4:00 in the morning, 4:30, the light's coming up, and I finally get to go to sleep. And so a couple hours later, because I have kids, I'm awake now. And at that time, they didn't have a TV or anything. And, they just had an old AM FM radio. And we could only get like the local station. So I had the local station playing and making breakfast. And the news report comes on. It's the police report. And they're reporting that there had been a bunch of calls that night about a UFO that was spotted over the lake. and the sheriff's police had also seen it.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it's like, yeah, and it's just local radio. And I think up in the North Woods, that's not an unusual thing to have happen. For me, it was a very unusual thing to have happen, I knew, something inside of me said, there's something bad out there, stay inside. So after that point, when people talk about UFOs, I guess I just keep an open mind, because I certainly felt something. And a lot of people called stuff in that night. Do we actually know what happened? So I think in all of
Yeah, it goes
this,
back to your original answer of like, you just don't know.
right. And people who say, and people have said to me, oh, well, I don't believe in ghosts, because, they're way too sophisticated. I just think, well, you're missing out, because, they're here. And sometimes there's so many great stories about ghosts coming back, family members, to comfort other family members. And if they were just open to it, they could get that message. But because they won't believe, then they don't get the message.
Can I ask you, do you ever get that feeling? Because they say if like a ghost is near you or a spirit is near you, you get that like chill.
Yeah.
Do you ever get
Yes.
that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, another favorite story. I was my books are based in Freeport, Illinois, which is the closest town. And so, in Freeport, I'm kind of a mini celebrity. It's a small fish, small pond kind of thing. So, so I was at the bank, and the vice president of the bank reads my books. And so I was in there opening up an account for my son, because he was going to college. And she said, Terri, I just have to tell you this. And I said, great. And she said that her father, the month before, her father had passed away. And this woman was getting ready to retire. So her father was probably, in his 80s or 90s. And he had been sick a while. And so they were expecting it. Hospice was, coming in. But her mother was worried, because she didn't want to be home alone when her husband passed. So she called her daughter and said, can you just stay at the house? So the daughter said, she went in, and she stayed in her old bedroom, which was right down the hall from her mom and dad's room. And her mom was in the guest room, and her dad was like in a hospital bed in their bedroom. And she slept with the door open so she could hear if her dad cried out. So she said in the middle of the night, she woke up and she looked into the hallway, and there in the hallway was her grandmother, who had passed years ago. And she was this little Italian woman. And she was standing in the hallway looking into the woman's father's bedroom, yelling at him in heavy, accented English, saying, Tony, why are you making us wait so long? Joey's here. Papa's here. We're all waiting for you. And she said she went on and on and on, telling him that, hurry up and die. We're all waiting for you on the other side, basically.
Wow.
Come on. Why are you taking
they
so
were so
long?
impatient on that side.
And so she said she fell back asleep, and she woke up, and she thought maybe it was a dream. And then she checked on her dad, and he had passed peacefully in the night. And she said, it must have been a ghost, because why would I dream that my grandmother would come down and yell at my dad that he should die? I said, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, no, it was a ghost. So, I mean, what a cool thing, though, to know that there's a family waiting for you, impatiently waiting for you. But yeah,
Right?
there's family waiting for you on the other side, and it really comforted her to know that all of those people were going to be welcoming her dad, so what a great gift her grandmother gave her, or she got to experience seeing that.
She'll get to experience it again one
Oh,
day.
yeah, I know, right?
Clearly,
I
grandma's
remember
impatient.
this.
I hope I'm that lucky.
And that a lot of people tell me those stories about somebody passes on, and they're heartbroken, and they can't deal with it, and they get a message somehow, and those are the greatest gifts. But those are ghosts. And if you're not going to believe, you're cutting yourself off from something that could be a really comforting experience in your life.
I agree.
I agree.
But also opening yourself up to potentially the bad stuff.
See, and that's, for example, I would never, and I did a book called Ghost Graves and Groves with another author who does paranormal. Both of us, it was funny, we both wrote our stories separately and we combined them, but we both had a chapter about Ouija boards and how neither of us would have a Ouija board in our house. And when I talked to Dale Kaczmarek, who, is this original Ghostbuster guy, he says that And he's been asked to do things like they send him to Europe to go down into underground Edinburgh. He does those really cool
That's
things.
cool.
Yeah. And they have to fill out a form if they want him to investigate. And one of the first questions is, have you ever used a Ouija board in this area? Or have you ever tried to have a seance in this area? And if they've done those, he probably won't take it, because you're inviting things in there that you don't know who's coming in. He said it's like closing your eyes and dialing your phone. He said, you don't know who's on the other line.
Oh, that's a great
It just
analogy.
doesn't. It just never made sense to me. Like, I know people strongly believe against the Ouija board, but it's made by Milton Bradley, so
I know. I you know what? I think it's not the tool itself.
it's the intent.
Yes.
It's the intent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you are saying, so you could do it with a pop bottle. I mean, you could play spin the bottle and invite strange
Right.
things in. But it is the idea.
Right. Guns aren't bad. It's
That's
people.
Right.
Well, and kind of, it's that you could probably do it with something else, but when you're doing it with that, you're kind of focusing your energies on trying to get something to answer you.
Yeah, like a seance.
Yes.
It's very equivalent to a seance. Yeah.
You've never tried using one before?
Actually, when I was in high school, growing up in Chicago, sleepover, because that's where those always happen, at a girl's house.
Oh,
Yeah.
And we were sitting around doing the Ouija
No
board.
pillow fights?
And the lights went off in her basement. I hate basements. The lights went off, and the candle that was in the middle of the circle that we were in. The candle shot up to about 4 feet tall, and I literally jumped over the circle of girls. I was like, I've never been so athletic in my life.
Weirdest game of duck
I know,
goose
right?
ever.
Exactly. And I ran for the other lights and turned those on. I don't know why we think we're safe when the lights are on, or when we pull a sheet over our head.
Right.
Like, it's like, yeah.
That's what I've always said. Like, why do sometimes we put our back up against a wall when we feel like there's a ghost? Like, what? It's a ghost.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And if I pull my sheet up, it can't see me anymore. It's like,
Right.
yeah. I know.
It won't see me under here.
That's right. Boo. Yeah. So that was it for me in Ouija boards, because
Well, that's insane,
the
honestly.
feeling, and it's not even the physicals, it's the feeling that was there. It wasn't good. And I was hosting a dinner for the Historical Society, and people had to pay to come in, and I tell ghost stories. And this one fellow, who was kind of an odd duck, he purchased a house in the country, not too far from us. And he was from Chicago, and he purchased it because he wanted a haunted house, because that was the big thing. And he was asking people to pay money to stay at his haunted house. So he really wanted it to be haunted. So some paranormal investigators from Milwaukee had come in and checked out his house. And I knew the people that owned the house before he bought it, and they never had any activity at all. So this guy was having Ouija boards and seances because he was inviting things in. And this group from Milwaukee had said in their report that they were really concerned because he was inviting all kinds of things in. So he was at this dinner trying to promote his house to these people interested in paranormal. At that dinner, somebody asked me about a Ouija board, and I said, I would never have one of those in my house. And he disagreed with me, and he said, well, you have to be trained on how to use it. And that same thing, I looked at him. I didn't say it out loud because I was supposed to be polite, but I was thinking, who does the training? Milton Bradley? I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, who's going to train
Are
me?
there directions in
I
those
know,
things?
right?
I don't know. Every time I get rid of one of them, my sister's like, "Look what I got you." So in my lifetime, I still have one in my house. I keep getting rid of them, and my sister's like, "Oh, we need to get one." So she buys me these things, and I'm stuck with them. I feel like I'm like,
Maybe it's just the same one.
no, this
She's
one.
pulling it out of the trash.
Are you sure that's really your sister?
Oh.
I don't know. Maybe she wants something bad to happen.
There are people who just think, and once again, if you don't believe, if you have no intention of believing, it could be monopoly. It could be nothing. But if you believe, again, if you're not hearing ghosts, or if you've closed yourself off, I don't think you'll have a problem with it, hopefully. but those people who are sensitive, they're really opening themselves up.
Yeah, I agree.
I never heard of a good story from one of those. Like,
No.
I play with the Ouija board and that's the most amazing ghost game. It's always like the worst thing ever.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? What was that movie? They had a Ouija board. There's a bunch of girls.
The one that was called Ouija.
I don't know. It could have
Brilliant.
I don't know.
There's one
so
called
many.
there's one called Ouija, and I think that one also has sequels. Like
been. I remember the girl at one
Strikes
point was
Back.
like floating,
Yeah.
What?
like above the Ouija board or like in the circle, the seance. I don't know.
I know of like 2016, there were like 5 or so Ouija board movies that like dropped in that year. It was dumb.
But
The
I
year
al-
of the Ouija.
but I also feel like if you use a Ouija board or a seance, you, depending on what your attention is, that's how it's going to go. Like I've been to seances that one was horrible because people were just egging certain things on, but I've been to ones that were beautifully done and you connected with loved ones. And I feel like that's the same thing with the Ouija board.
I guess my concern with both of those things, and I'm not a psychic, and I don't, and I know people that are psychics who have amazing abilities, but when they're in the hands of somebody who doesn't know what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
how do you control how it turns out? Even if you have the best intention, if you're opening up a portal, how do you know who's coming through?
Well, this is true. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's positive and negative
Right.
everywhere.
Well, the
like-
whole thing is their hand's not really supposed to be like touching it. It's supposed to be moved by whatever
Right.
is there, isn't
Right,
it, or something
yep.
like that?
Yep,
Right, but how can you trust your friends?
I know.
that's very true.
I would never trust it. Stop it. Stop moving it. Okay, then take your hand
That's
off.
right. That's right. And then if it moves, leave the room. So,
Yeah.
Turn the lights
That's
on.
right. Yeah.
It's over.
Yep.
That's what I would say. I'd say prove it to me and move by yourself.
That's right. And then it would. And then you think, oh.
It probably would.
And if
then
that
what?
did happen, which knowing my luck,
And then you'd say, go home now. And it would say, no. And you'd think, uh-oh. Which is why, going back to like way earlier, when Dale asked me if I wanted him to bring a paranormal group into my house, I said no, because I kind of have this relationship with my ghosts where we really don't talk to each other. They just do their thing. I do my thing. We kind of don't really acknowledge each other, and we're good that way. I don't want to stir anything up. And I don't know if a paranormal investigation would. Some of these shows where the person screams, touch me. And then,
Oh, I hate
oh,
that.
I did
Oh,
too.
that
And they
one.
touch him and he
Ah.
screams. And I think, dude, you just asked them to touch you.
you're
I know,
inviting
right?
them.
Or they're
In a
or they're
negative way.
just nasty with them. They're just like
Yes.
it's like stop. Just stop.
I'd be the worst show. Like, if anyone's here, don't do anything. Look at that. Perfect.
Nothing
Can you
happened. I
just
guess
write
they're
it
there.
down for later?
Yeah, that's right.
We'll
Right.
check.
Wait till
We'll
they
check
leave,
that
yeah.
journal later.
Well, and that's the thing too. If we believe that the ghosts, most of the ghosts that we interact with are people who potentially we loved, or people who loved our homes, or just people who happen to be dead, that you need to treat them with respect. And that one particular show, they don't treat anybody with respect.
Yeah, I assuming that they're thinking whatever ghost there is always a bad one. It can't. I don't know why it's never a good ghost, because I wouldn't. Assuming if it's a good ghost, I'm not yelling at them.
Right.
Yeah.
They're assuming. I guess it's like someone that's like, messing with the people or upsetting the people that are living there. So that's why they're yelling. Maybe I don't know.
I've really enjoyed. There's it's not new anymore, but there's a show called Kindred Spirits. Have you guys seen that one?
They just had their last episode. They're gonna do another one in a couple months.
I love that show because they come in, and first of all, they're not going to get rid of the ghost. I don't think they've ever. I love Dead Files,
Hmm.
but this is totally different because basically what they do is they come in and they investigate and they try to talk to the ghost and figure out why it's there, and then report back to the house owner. Okay, well, this ghost is here because blah blah blah, whatever. And then the house owner isn't as afraid because they've humanized whatever was happening in the house. And I love that because it's like, it's not kicking the ghost out, but it's kind of saying this is their story and that's why they're here.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
I think they're actually from Ghost
Yes.
Hunters, Amy Bruni and Adam Berry. If you watch the last one that just happened about 2 weeks ago, it's in Asbury. That's like 10-15 minutes away from
Oh,
us.
really? Okay, I haven't
Yeah,
watched.
it's a very interesting episode.
Neat.
I've got to watch this. I've seen
Oh,
like a snippet of
it's a
it.
great show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how they handle it. And you know what I always liked Ghost Hunters.
Oh, we did
Yes.
too.
Yeah, they treated the ghosts with respect. There was no goofy stuff. So yeah.
Kind of on the subject of TV shows, and you said, and I could be way wrong here, but I guess you're kind of believing that one lady's story of after this, there's maybe like a heaven where we get to see everybody. Do you believe in like reincarnation? Because there was a show that was called, I believe it was A Ghost Within My Child,
Oh,
where they were like kind of reincarnated. It was a super
It
old
was
show.
about children.
The
who
children
had,
that remember a past life, and the parents would be like, well, like confused what they're talking about until they researched it and realized who and which they were talking about.
I personally don't believe in reincarnation. I feel like so in my religious background, I believe that we were spirits before we were who we are before we were born. We have this kind of life on earth to become who we want to become, and then when we die, we keep that same spirit through that whole cycle. But it's interesting because I knew a fellow who was a hypnotist. He was the kind of hypnotist that if somebody was allergic to anesthesia, he could hypnotize you so that you could go through an operation without
wow.
feeling anything. So I mean, he was a professional. He wasn't like turning somebody into doing the chicken dance. He was really, he did this. And
That's scary sounding,
right.
but interesting.
That's right. And so he was saying that there's a theory. Do you ever hear that joke about an airplane landing? And it's like, at first it's 3 feet, and then it's 1.5 feet, and then it's, and you go down and down, but it never lands because it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so if you do the math, and I said that there wasn't supposed to be math, but this is math. If you, as you cut, the fractions, you get to 1/1,000,000th of us, but it math wise, it never,
till infinity.
right. So they say sound waves are actually like that. When we put a sound wave out, it really never diminishes. And sometimes when you're under that level of hypnosis, you can pick up sound waves from a long time ago. And so I wonder if those people who have been hypnotized and can describe things, if it's because they can hear it. I don't know.
That's an interesting
that
thought,
makes a
though.
lot of sense, because then, now that we're talking about ghosts, because then you have the light waves.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, I get it.
And so, maybe those children are so open to whatever. Kids are the ones that see ghosts before adults do. Kids are so open to those things. And if they're tuned in, if they hear a story, if they're sleeping at night and in that delta stage of sleep, and so they're open, and maybe their little mind is just tuned just the right way, and they're picking up laughter, and they're picking up these sound waves from a long, long time ago. Then they come down and they talk about the conversations that they heard the night before.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
interesting.
it.
Interesting view. No, it makes sense
like
though.
it. I never thought of that. I never heard of that. I never thought of that. That's nice.
No, my original thought was maybe they were being used as like a catalyst kind of from a spirit to portray. It's not necessarily who they are, but it's just, they're using them as a voice.
Almost like a possession.
Yeah.
To an extent, but like not a bad one.
Yeah.
Just
not every possession.
Right, they just want their
bad.
story heard.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is, they're all, no one knows, so it's all whatever we think, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess kids are always open to stuff because we see those babies, like you watch them on the baby monitor, and they're looking up into
Pointing
the
at
ceiling,
Right.
pointing stuff, laughing, giggling. You're like, what's going
Right.
on?
Our daughter had that. She saw my grandparents. Never met them. Never even knew them. At the top of our stairs.
Oh, that's right. I remember saying that.
Yeah. And she saw her own grandmother the day that she died when she was coming out of the shower.
Yeah.
And-
She was a little scared about that one, though.
That was scary
Yeah.
for her, yeah. Because she was older.
Shocking, really. Not like
Yeah.
scary, but like not expecting it, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
But the connection between the two of them must have been so great for her to visit there before she kept going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of like tried to tune it out to try to ease it. Like, no, that's just, you're just seeing things, which I did the wrong
She was,
thing, really. But you never.
Well, you're truthful. She was seeing things.
Well, yeah, that's
Technically.
true.
That's
But she was frightened. So.
Well, and it is. I mean, and that's I think when you start looking at how Hollywood portrays ghosts, it's never a good thing, except for maybe the Canterville ghost. I mean, that's not a bad one, but
And that movie Ghost.
and the movie
with
Ghost,
Patrick
right?
Swayze, that was
Right?
pretty good.
Hey, Casper wasn't
Okay,
bad.
Casper was he was actually
Well, they use one happy
That's
ghost,
right.
like two bad
That's right.
ghosts.
Well,
So,
okay, yeah, he had bad
That's
uncles.
right.
yeah.
That's not his fault.
It's always the uncles. It's always the
Yes.
We all those.
but for the most part, we teach our kids to be afraid of ghosts, and instead of saying, well, They're just people who don't have their bodies anymore. They still, if they were good when they were alive, they're still good. If they were not good when they were alive, they're still not good. And kind of like Sixth Sense,
Yeah.
Yes.
Which was also creepy and
Yeah,
scary.
it was. After you've seen it for the first time, and you realize the shock values, then you go back and watch it and you realize they knew that this kid had an ability, and they were
Right.
just trying to talk to somebody who could figure out their problems.
Right. That was a good movie.
Yeah, it was.
I want to go back and watch that movie.
So, Terry, why don't you tell everybody where they could find you and learn more about you and read your books?
Okay, well, Amazon carries all of my books, both print and e-copy, and it's Terri, Terri, Reid, Reid. And if you just look me up on Amazon, you can find me there. I have an author Facebook page. I also have a Terri Reid's Attic Facebook page, and that leads you to our podcast. And that's kind of a new thing. For years, I've done something called Freaky Friday on my website at terrireid.com. It kind of sounds egotistical as I'm saying all these things.
It's just your name
I
everywhere.
know, right? Then there's my car, the Terri Reid mobile. No. So
Now I'm going to see all of
I
those
know,
around.
right? So yeah, every Friday I have something called Freaky Friday, and it's just a blog, and it started out being ghost stories, and then it ended up being all kind Bray Road, and it's just all kinds of interesting things to me. And so I just write a blog about that. And so now we're taking those blogs and we're recording them and putting them out as a podcast. And so that's what Terri Reid's Attic is. It's just kind of all kinds of paranormal things. Interesting thing, and I do this on my Freaky Friday. Do you know that if you go to TripAdvisor on their reviews, you can actually put in the search word haunted, and reviews about haunted hotels and the experiences people had in those haunted hotels will come up on the
Oh, wow.
reviews. I love doing that.
Let me guess, Danielle. Did you already know that?
No, I'm going to look
Now
tonight.
she's going to look.
I'm going to use that for places not to stay.
Yes,
Exactly.
you do use it the opposite.
Oh, some of the stories, and I forget which one. I think it was in Texas that they were there and they heard somebody knocking on the door and kids laughing, and they opened the door and there was nobody on the floor. So, and it used to, I think the hotel used to be like an orphanage or something. So yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, before you go someplace, just do that.
Next time we go to
TripAdvisor.
Gettysburg, we are definitely going to TripAdvisor
Yes,
first.
yes.
That's got to be chock full.
Oh, I bet. I've been at Gettysburg a couple times and I haven't felt anything. And maybe it was where I was, but I sometimes think when you get so many people walking through a place, you kind of tamp down on all that paranormal energy. It's like it gets absorbed in all the people.
Yeah, they get tired of seeing everyone. They can't entertain us all.
I think so.
Well, the first and last time we all went. Danny didn't go, but we all did. And Nick over here was yelling at the ghosts just like you would see.
Yeah,
We went on a ghost tour.
Yeah.
He's yelling.
Yeah, I went off into the woods by myself and tried to find someone that wanted to talk to me, and it was just me talking to me.
And everybody heard him. It was something.
Well, after a couple hours looking for ghosts, I guess you're annoyed.
I was going to say,
I just want something.
one of the things that I talk about, I think in my first podcast is, so we've lived in this house like for 30 years now. And in total, we have probably had 36 paranormal experiences. So that's maybe a paranormal experience a year, so you get these ghost hunter people and they're put in a house for 2 days? And they're supposed to make something happen. And ghosts don't do that on cue, and so that's why.
Yeah, they're not trained actors.
Exactly. And maybe they just don't want to do anything that day. And so that's why you get all of these, oh, did you see that? No, I just missed it, constantly on those shows, because
Yeah.
it has to look good to get somebody to tune in next week, but they might not get anything. And it doesn't mean that there's no ghosts. It just means that they might not get anything that day.
Well, you got to imagine how many people are actually, because if you're only seeing the actors, but there's the crew behind them,
Right.
there's the lights. I mean, everything's there. It's just got to be too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And if you have those introvert ghosts that just, They don't like a lot of people. They just,
Yeah, they're shy.
I know. I totally understand them.
Shy ghost.
I'd be a shy ghost. I'd just be looking at people, I think.
I just feel like if your intentions are not to find anything, that's when it's going to happen.
Right. If you're open to it and you just go along your business, I think that's true for a lot of things. Those people that, are so anxious to get married or so anxious for something to happen, and they work and work at it. But then once they say, you know what, forget it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And they just move on with their life, then it happens. I think
Yes.
that's what life does.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
So we've done philosophy, we've done
We've come very
I
full
know,
circle.
we really have.
So that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode. You can find us, as always, The Beer Latte Show on Instagram and Facebook, at Beer Latte on Twitter, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah. This drip all on my body, soaking wet the sunny. Looking like a walking liquor, you can tell I'm grinding. Rolling backwards.